Salut à toutes et à tous, merci de nous rejoindre ici à Addis-Abeba. Nous sommes au siège de l'Union africaine, quartier général de l'Union africaine qui s'apprête donc à abriter la 39e session ordinaire des chefs d'État. Il est prévu lors de cette importante réunion de discuter d'un certain nombre de sujets clés qui tiennent à cœur les chefs d'État. Vous n'êtes pas sans savoir que l'accès à l'eau potable sur le continent est un problème. Alors, l'un des objectifs clés, c'est donc parler de la gestion de l'eau sur le continent. Il y aura également, parmi les points à discuter lors de cette session, la question de la paix et de la sécurité sur le continent. Il y a plusieurs foyers de tension, que ce soit en RDC, au Soudan, ou bien encore au Nigeria avec le groupe Boko Haram. Il y aura également la question de l'intégration économique et de la libre circulation des personnes et des biens. L'Union africaine essaye de voir comment supprimer les visas entre les pays. Et on n'oublie pas évidemment la question climatique, comment positionner le continent au mieux par rapport à la COP 30, à la COP 32, qui se prépare donc, et évidemment en dernier point, le renouvellement des instances de l'Union africaine. Alors, je suis ici avec mes collègues, Abdoulaye Hassan. Hi, welcome to Addis-Abeba.
Indeed, Sani, it's a great experience already. The WADR is here live in Addis-Abeba for the tonight EU Summit.
Je suis aussi avec Francis Boniface. Francis, hi.
Yeah, Sunny.
Welcome in Addis-Abeba.
Just like Abdullah said, I think the weather is splendid. Everything is going well, and we're waiting for action to begin tomorrow.
Exactly.
But it's already starting because we had the accreditation center where journalists and other dignitaries are coming to get registered. As you can see, some of them passing behind us from time to time. I think it's splendid already.
So far, so good.
We wait for everything, the main issues to start coming up tomorrow.
Comme vous le savez, WADR est déjà à Addis-Abeba. Suivez donc cette 39e session avec nous sur notre chaîne à Dakar 94.9 et puis sur nos plateformes en ligne avec toute l'équipe digitale qui va donc se mettre sur l'événement. Alors on va maintenant discuter des points clés que j'ai annoncés lorsque je plantais donc le décor tout à l'heure. J'ai parlé de la question de l'accès à l'eau et de la gestion de l'eau. On va commencer avec ce premier point avec mon collègue Abdoulaye Hassan. Abdoulaye Hassan, vous animez l'émission Enviroscope à WADR. La question de la gestion de l'eau est un problème sur le continent et vous le savez, n'est-ce pas?
Merci beaucoup, Sani. Indeed, water crisis or the issue of accessibility of potable water for populations across the continent has been an issue that remains almost unsolved, an issue that requires all attention and all hands on deck because we understand very well, Sani, from research and from all of the previous editions of Enviroscope being treated by WADR, that water remains almost an intersection, across the board for why Africa is where it is today, from conflict to political instability, climate change, and even the intercommunal conflicts that we have today in different parts of the continent, from Kenya, there in East Africa, you go down to West Africa, Nigeria, and the Sahel precisely, where you have the farmers-herders conflict. It's always around the scarcity of water resources. You can also look at the Lake Chad area today. The water basin is drying up. We can also talk about the Niger River. It's drying up. The surface water also is drying up, so we have more drought today. Farmers are suffering, herders are suffering, rural population are also suffering, and this affects women and children, right? We also talk about the underground water today because of illegal mining. In the case of Ghana, the Galamsey today also, you have millions and millions of people suffering the consequences of this. And also, it translates in many ways, in many fronts.
Francis, la question de l'accès à l'eau est un problème, comme Abdoulaye est en train de le dire, mais il n'y a pas que l'eau qui sera au menu des discussions. Il y aura également la question de la paix et de la sécurité. Boko Haram continue de frapper, Al-Shabaab continue également de frapper, sans oublier le Soudan avec les paramilitaires, les FSR et bien sûr le groupe du général Abourane qui continue de se battre.
I think it's going to be key to, just like you said, it's not just water. Water is the principal issue of focus here, but it's not just going to be about water. There is also, like you said, the issue of peace and security. And I think this comes at a very interesting time for the AU, because there's been a trend where much of the conflicts that is happening in Africa, some of the settlements, some of the mediation are being conducted by forces outside Africa. You mentioned the Sudanese issue with Al-Burhan and
Daglo, Hamdan Daglo, Yameti.
You see the Saudi Arabia involved, you see the UAE involved, the US, Qatar somehow involved. Yes. You go to DRC and Rwanda,
and the US,
the US involved, you have Qatar involved, you know. We had Angola involved at a stage, but it looked like they didn't get anywhere, so the US and Qatar had to come in. Then I think Togo also played a part in that. So you see a lot of foreign powers having a say over what is happening in Africa as regards to peace and security. So I think this is coming at a key time to see what is the posture of the AU towards this. Is the AU losing power, losing relevance in terms of being able to be a mediator?
Abdoulaye Hassan, la question de l'intégration économique. Hier, par exemple, vous êtes arrivé ici à Addis-Abeba, vous avez payé $150 pour avoir le visa. Alors, la question de la suppression des visas sera au cœur des discussions. Est-ce que vous pensez que c'est important qu'on ait des États en Afrique où on ne va pas demander de visa avant le voyage?
Sani, indeed, it's a critical question that you just asked me now, and for a while the discussion has been on. I think just last year there was a similar summit here in Addis-Abeba where they talked about a need for borderless Africa, and if you are not in that situation, you may really not grasp the importance of that. But just arriving in Addis-Abeba, I had to pay $150 for visa stay for just a week. And imagine if that was to be a young person who is only coming here to perhaps market a good or service or connect with an interested business partner. So there's a lot that goes to this, and I understand that governments and different policymakers will argue differently why perhaps this will take long to happen or why it shouldn't happen. But again, Sani, it's very, very important, because if you do not remove some of these barriers, then economic integration, the free movement of peoples will really be a major problem. And we need that to happen now because, you know, on paper, Africa seems to be doing well. But when you speak with locals, like we just did today in Addis-Ababa, you understand that our economies are suffering, and there's a spiral movement downwards. So we need to pick up. The only way to pick up also is when we allow for free movement of people, goods, and services. So yes.
Sunny, and Francis was thinking, you know, you cover a lot of French regions, the French-speaking regions for West Africa Democracy Radio. What do you think in terms of, you are talking about removing visas and all that, promoting inter-African travel and all, intra-African travel and all that. But we have the issue of the AES. We have the issue of nationalism, some kind of protectionism going on also, some would say, in the AES states, where they are looking more towards themselves than probably the rest of the continent. How do you think this will play out?
Francis, vous savez, quand on prend la question de la libre circulation des personnes et des biens en Afrique, c'est un gros dossier où il y a beaucoup de discours politiques. Mais au fond, rien ne change. Quand vous prenez les échanges entre les pays africains, on remarque que les pays africains échangent très peu entre eux. Alors, la majeure partie du temps, ce sont les grandes puissances qui commercent beaucoup plus avec le continent. On voit d'abord la Chine qui commerce beaucoup avec le continent. Il y a les États-Unis à travers l'AGOA qui commerce avec le continent. Il y a d'autres puissances également qui commercent avec le continent. Mais il y a cette difficulté pour les dirigeants africains de trouver des moyens assez pratiques, assez simples pour connecter économiquement les populations. Alors que quand vous allez d'un pays à un autre, ce sont les mêmes types de populations que nous avons. On parle par exemple Hausa au Nigeria, on parle Hausa au Niger. On parle Hausa également dans une partie du nord du Bénin. Donc c'est pour dire que ce sont les mêmes populations, peu importe le pays. Ce serait plus facile que nous puissions utiliser les mécanismes internes qu'il y a à travers les leaders communautaires, les chefs traditionnels et tout ça pour voir comment est-ce qu'au niveau micro, on peut promouvoir les échanges. Les échanges se font au niveau micro. C'est comment les valoriser pour les amener en surface pour que ça puisse profiter aux économies africaines. C'est là le problème, parce que quand vous prenez la part de l'informel, elle est grande dans nos économies. Et dans une économie, quand la part de l'informel est grande, cette économie-là ne peut pas être viable. Et nos économies sont trop extraverties. Elles sont tournées beaucoup plus vers l'extérieur. Alors que pour qu'une économie se développe, on l'a vu avec la Chine, il faut pratiquer ce qu'on appelle le protectionnisme. Il faut prioriser vos propres productions d'abord, les valoriser avant de pouvoir vous en sortir. Sinon, si vous ouvrez vos marchés, vous ne pouvez à jamais vous développer économiquement. Et c'est ce qui s'observe un peu partout dans la plupart des pays africains.
So the protectionism, right? How do we make sure that this protectionism is not being practiced at the national level? That is to say, Benin doesn't want Niger to have anything to do with its economy in any way that is going to help Niger. Niger doesn't want Benin to have it easy economically. How do we make sure that we are not antagonistic towards each other with trade policies?
Alors, Francis, à ce niveau, ce qu'il faut faire, c'est d'essayer d'abord de minimiser les accords que nous signons avec les grandes puissances. C'est d'abord les grandes puissances. Nos pays ont des accords avec les grandes puissances qui leur imposent des choses. Il ne faut pas commercer avec tel pays est en train de commercer avec telle autre puissance. Nous, on n'est pas d'accord, etc. Donc, le problème, c'est qu'on ne fait pas d'abord confiance à la CEDEAO, par exemple, qui aurait pu parler au nom de tout le monde, qui a des politiques, qui a des instruments en matière économique, mais qui ne sont pas utilisés. Parce que chaque État négocie individuellement avec une puissance pour ses propres intérêts. C'est là que se trouve tout le problème. Il faut qu'on règle tout le problème et qu'on donne réellement le droit à des instances comme la CEDEAO de pouvoir discuter au nom de tous les pays, de négocier au nom de tous les pays. Que chaque pays n'aille pas dire non, moi, ceci ne m'arrange pas, voilà ce qui m'arrange. Je pense que c'est ce qui divise le plus le continent africain. Quand vous prenez l'Union européenne, ils sont unanimes, ils sont unis sur la plupart des points qui régulent leur économie. Et aujourd'hui, ça marche. C'est pourquoi quand Donald Trump leur met la pression, il a toute l'Europe en face de lui. Parce que tous ces pays-là sont unis. Ils ont des politiques et ils s'unissent au sein de ces politiques-là pour pouvoir défendre leurs intérêts communs. C'est vrai, en interne, chaque État continue de défendre ses propres intérêts, mais de façon globale, la défense doit se faire au niveau de l'organisation. Et quand c'est comme ça, quand vous êtes unis, vous êtes plus forts et les puissances, avant de vous parler, ont peur de vous. Mais en Afrique, tel n'est pas le cas. Tel président négocie, tel autre négocie, et puis etc. C'est ce qui fait qu'au niveau national, vous avez un protectionnisme qui est assuré avec une puissance. Ça peut être la Russie, les États-Unis ou je ne sais qui. Mais au niveau régional, c'est des problèmes. Parce que la Russie est là, les États-Unis sont là, l'Union européenne, ils sont là, etc. Ça devient vraiment un problème pour gérer tout ça.
I hope I can add to what Sani does said, Francis. And I think this is why it's very important. And I'm happy that we are here because the 39 AU Summit really for many should be seen as a catalyst from a plenty of talks around pledges and commitments to actions, from talks around inspirations to reality and actions, right? Because like Sani just said, which is very true, more and more there's a fragmentation around trade and commerce when it comes to Africa. Just last year, we had more between 12 and 15 different summits. Countries in EU calling African heads of state to one boardroom for a day or two to discuss these with heads of state individually. And I think it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. So it's now time for ECOWAS to rethink a strategy and put everybody together in one room. Or it's now time again, once again, for the AU to strengthen, for instance, the African Future Area, EFCT, to coordinate actions of respective governments, regardless of their affiliations or allegiance or loyalty to whichever of these Western powers, because like the Sahel today is leaning more towards Russia. China is making its way in there. You have Turkey, you have Italy, you have Spain, Nigeria, for instance. You can talk about the US today, not just having a political maneuver, but using force. This is what we see today. Use of force. We can also talk about it, like Sani said, President Trump last year when he came to office, the first meeting he had with African heads of state were 5 select countries. All of these countries are something in similar, right? They all are rich on the mineral resource. So it's time for us to work together as one continent, one body, to look out for interest when it comes to trade and commerce and refuse to be spoken to individually. Otherwise, then economic integration and, of course, protecting our interests will be far from reality.
Thank you so much. Merci, chers collègues. C'était une discussion importante. Mais avant de clore ça, Francis, j'aimerais te poser cette question. Toi qui travailles sur tout ce qui est lié au digital, etc. Aujourd'hui, on remarque que les jeunesses africaines sont très connectées. Une manifestation qui se passe au Kenya, tu as des jeunes Nigériens qui vont là-bas pour supporter les Kenyans. Une manifestation au Nigeria, l'inverse se réalise. Donc, nous sommes dans un monde très connecté. Comment tout ceci peut profiter à l'Afrique en termes d'évolution économique et de développement tout court? Parce qu'aujourd'hui, la technologie devrait nous permettre de pouvoir nous développer, Francis.
Definitely. Technology really helps in terms of development. And this connectivity, I think, is really important. It can help in development. It can help Africa in growth. It can help create opportunities, even more than anything, for young people, especially. But I'll go back to the point you made, which is about removing the visa restrictions, right? No matter the level of connectivity online, the world is a global village, we've been saying for more than 26 years now since the millennium started. Yes, but in Africa, it comes with a caveat, which is the world is a global village, but in Africa, you can't really move around so easily. You can connect, of course. Once in a while, there are internet restrictions here and there for political reasons, but it's not something that happens every time, except in some select countries where, maybe like Eritrea, where we know that it's a little bit more difficult. But largely, we can connect online. We can share opportunities. We can share information, just like you cited the example of Nigerian supporting and even going over to Kenya to support, and some supporting online the protests. The same thing happened. The Kenyan youth also returned the same energy. I remember when Nigeria had the NSAS in 2020s, there was also a lot of support from young people from other African countries. We also saw the same thing happen 2-3 years ago in Senegal. You know, just before the last election, a lot of massive support from different countries.
Also in Ghana.
Not just in Ghana too, just recently too, and also in the DRC, even though it wasn't really political, it was more about the conflict, but you saw a lot of support from young people towards ending the conflict, ending the bloodshed in Eastern DRC. Yeah, but there needs to be that physical connectivity also. That is where I think Africa still lacks it, right? We have a situation where each country needs, for me, I would say each country needs to identify its strengths. You know, what is the strength of Namibia? What is it? Human capital? What is the strength of South Africa? What's the biggest value they offer? What of Cameroon? You know, what of Kenya? What of Egypt? What do they offer, right? When we can easily know each other's strength, we can now know how to play to each other's strength.
Complement each other.
And for example, you may need a good IT engineer for a specific task. But you know that the probability of getting someone from, let's say, Kenya is way higher than getting someone from, I don't know, maybe Togo or Benin, right? But how easily can that person move and settle? You know, what internal documentation does the person
visa application, residency permits,
and all that. We're even talking about work here. How about the entrepreneurial people, the business people? You know, we signed up for the AFTA some few years ago, but we are still having implementation issues. Some people along the border, the customs, immigration along the border, some of them have no clue about what that is about. We've had the ECOWAS protocol for those from West Africa for ages. But you go to a border between some West African countries. Let me go to the Senegal-Gambia border, even as a West African citizen. And it seems like you are the only one that are aware of the ECOWAS protocol. Even the immigration and customs officers look like they've never heard of it before.
So some of the privileges that should be accorded you as a West African are denied.
Are denied. Now, not to mention someone coming from East or Central or South or
more difficult.
North Africa. So these are the issues. That connectivity online is there, but we are here to translate it to physical connectivity. Unlike Europe, where you could just pick up your bags and get a job, maybe from Croatia, and somehow land in Italy and France and start over almost immediately. So these are the issues we need to sort out. It's not enough to be connected online.
Mais Francis, dans la culture africaine, on est chaleureux, on est solidaire, etc. Est-ce que c'est parce qu'on a pris toutes ces pratiques-là des colonisateurs qu'aujourd'hui nous sommes en train de souffrir? C'est-à-dire les colons sont repartis, mais nous on garde ces pratiques-là que eux ils utilisaient il y a des années en arrière. C'est maintenant que nous, on prend ça pour dire qu'on se protège.
I wanted to say tout à fait, but I don't know what the exact translation is in English. But that's the French word that came to my head. I really agree with that. I think we took this from those that colonized us, right? You are Beninese, right? I'm Nigerian. I think you probably follow events happening in France more than events. Okay, you follow events happening in Nigeria because you're a journalist specialized in West Africa. But if you're not a journalist specialized in West Africa, I almost guarantee you that you would be more aware of events in France than in your neighboring country, just because it's an English-speaking country, officially. So that's the problem. You have young people in, let's go to Southern Africa, let's speak Eswatini, for example. A young person in Eswatini would probably know next to nothing about what's happening in Togo, but will probably know a lot about what's happening in the US.
And the UK.
So that's where we find ourselves as Africans, where we are divided along colonial lines, where our interest is somehow tied to what happened with, I don't like calling them colonial masters, but the countries that colonized our country, our specific country in Africa. And luckily we are in a free country, or in Ethiopia, free in all its never colonized. So you could also see from the mindset of people around here that it's a bit different. There is that original Africanness about it. So I think that's something that other countries need to imbibe, drop a little bit of the colonization mentality, try to know each other better, start with the neighboring countries, right? I think for some countries like Liberia and Sierra Leone, which are neighboring countries, you can see that they're already doing that. They're really close to each other.
Yes, they have the Manu River.
Yeah, they have that. So we have certain examples of countries that look inward.
But Francis, that is also possible. Or I am not thinking, right? But it's hard to, it will take a lot of work, consciously and unconsciously, for us to get this done.
Et voilà, Francis, tu veux ajouter quelque chose?
Well, I think he said almost everything I wanted to say, but just to add something, I think a lot of people say this. The future is now for young people. We need to stop saying leaders to borrow and all that. But you said something earlier where you talked about differences among the political class holding the entire people back, because these are people that share a lot. People share a lot, Go to Central African Republic, you find the same people in South Sudan. You find the same people in some parts of Uganda, But they've been torn apart. By what? By political leaders, by foreign interests, by interest in minerals, by interest in oil. Different kind of interests, How do we make sure that our young people don't toe that line? How do we make sure that we don't inherit an enmity that we know nothing about? Yes. How do we make sure that this is not transferred? We are standing on Ethiopian soil today. There is still the Tigray problem here in Ethiopia. Beautiful country, as this, but there's still that problem. And it's the same thing in other countries also.
Absolutely.
You know, people inheriting hate that they know nothing about, instilled by politicians. So we need to find a way to make sure that young people know that the future is today and they need to grab it with both of their hands. And how do we start grabbing it? We start grabbing it by letting go of hate that we know nothing about. You know, don't go fight for a politician for his own interest, basically, because that's what's killing the continent. We need young people to think differently, and I hope that at least this is a good opportunity to talk, to get to know each other, and to do better as a continent, starting with the young people, because it's key.
Et voilà, c'est ce qu'on peut dire donc pour ce qui est des enjeux de cette 39e session ordinaire des chefs d'État de l'Union africaine. Nous sommes au siège de l'UA à Addis-Abeba où nous avons donc posé les vrais enjeux de cette session. Et comme l'ont dit mes collègues lors de cette discussion, ce qui reste important, c'est bien sûr comment trouver les voies et moyens pour rendre la jeunesse africaine beaucoup plus indépendante, briser les barrières et permettre au pays de pouvoir utiliser leur potentialité pour pouvoir se développer. C'est le plus important et c'est ce à quoi les chefs d'État vont réfléchir ici. WADR est ici avec vous et nous allons couvrir cette session pour vous sur notre radio et sur nos plateformes en ligne. Merci à toutes et à tous de nous avoir suivis. Au revoir. À vous la parole.
Bye.
Bye. It's you speaking.